Nikos, do you mind just introducing yourself to us and a little bit about your research as well that you've done prolifically today?
Yeah, hi, my name is Nikos Ntoumanis. I'm a professor of motivation science. I'm currently based at the University of Southern Denmark. And I'm a researcher who's primarily worked in the area of physical activity promotion for the last 20 plus years.
Excellent. Yeah, I know you've got a lot of research on, in particular, self-determination theory and that relationship to exercise. Are you able to kind of walk us through, a little bit about what self-determination theory is for those who don't know?
Yeah, of course. I have used self-determination theory a fair bit in my research. It's a fairly well-known theory of motivation with applications in a wide variety of life domains, such as work, education, health, interpersonal relationships. And essentially, this theory talks about different types of motivation that differ in quality. Some are better than others. And it states that individuals will able to obtain better outcomes in terms of showing better cognitive outcomes, better emotional experiences, better behavioral outcomes in terms of persistence, goal achievement, when they have high quality motivation, and motivation that is based on feelings of enjoyment and value, as opposed to motivation due to internal or external pressures. And to achieve this high quality motivation, this theory argues that individuals need to be able to satisfy three basic psychological needs that all of us have, even if we don't consciously value these three needs. We do feel better and perform better and function better as individuals when these needs are satisfied. So these needs are the need to feel in control of what you do, to feel autonomous, the need to feel good at what you do, the need for competence, and the need to feel meaningfully related and accepted by people around you, the need for relatedness.
Okay,
that's
so
in a nutshell the theory, yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned those three basic psychological needs, so autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So I know, you've done a lot of work in different contexts with this theory, but in particular with physical activity. How is that kind of applied to exercise, and particularly if someone has the goal of exercising more, how could they go about that using those three psychological needs?
Yeah, so this theory has been applied quite a lot in terms of promoting physical activity and exercise. And I guess if someone wants to exercise more, this theory gives some suggestions in terms of this individual or the people around these individuals thinking more in terms of why they want to exercise more, and progressively try to shift any motivation that is based on pressures, feelings of guilt that one might have not exercising enough, or pressure from spouse or from physician to be more active, to potentially shift these kind of reasons to more what we call autonomous motives, motivations based on enjoyment and personal value. So it is important that individuals choose activities that they like, and so because they're more likely to stick with those activities. And the experience that they have within these activities should be conducive to feelings of autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So for instance, in a fitness environment, if you work with a fitness instructor, a personal trainer, it's important that the personal trainer tries to support the exercises need for competence by giving positive and constructive feedback, setting achievable goals with the exerciser, promoting autonomy in terms of acknowledging, for instance, some issues such as that the exerciser might feel at the beginning a little bit concerned in terms of being more active, for instance, because they don't feel they have the stamina or the strength to be more active, or perhaps because they feel fatigue and muscular discomfort. So acknowledging negative feelings and identifying with the exerciser what are the activities that the exerciser enjoys doing, and trying to use this more in the training. And lastly, relating is quite important, so that the fitness instructor establishes a good rapport with the exerciser, is able to listen to what the exerciser has to say, and be unconditionally supportive. And if it's a group setting, create situations within which exercises will provide emotional or other types of support for each other.
So that there's a lot there in terms of those conditions that you're talking about to make exercise, more doable in a long-term basis for people. And I'm hearing that one of the keys is enjoying what you're doing, and I think that falls under the whole intrinsic motivation of SDT. So, what about in context, and this could be exercise or not, but what about in context where people perhaps have to do something they don't enjoy? For example, an exam or study for an exam that's part of their course. How can they go about augmenting that from an SDT point of view, and making that a more enjoyable or consistent or just high quality behavior?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And also it is true that sometimes when we engage in some types of exercise, we don't necessarily enjoy the exercise, but we know that they're good for us, right? That's where the one of the types of motivation, identified regulation, comes into play. According to this type of motivation, we are motivated because we value the behavior, as opposed to necessarily because we enjoy it. And the same goes with the other kinds of behaviors you mentioned before, such as revising for an important exam, or perhaps attending an important medical screening appointment. There are lots of stuff we do in life because they're important for us, but we don't get any enjoyment out of them. There are some strategies that one can use in this situation. One is, for instance, to try to remind oneself about the utility of these activities. If it's not possible to build in any enjoyment in doing them, and the utility of these activities is something that has to be developed over time by, for instance, identifying what are the potential outcomes of doing this activity for not only for yourself, but also the benefits for the people around you. And sometimes also try to reward yourself for doing these activities by doing something fun you enjoy before or after the activity, so that you associate this activity with something fun that precedes or follows that activity.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. And as well, touching on something you said earlier in the way of coaches and trainers, and how they can augment enjoyment and adherence to exercise. I came across one of your studies where you found essentially that, I think, a pilot study where the no pain, no gain approach essentially wasn't supported in terms of continued intention to exercise from those participants. And, as someone who's been in the fitness industry for a number of years now, that flies in the face of what I do see and what I've practiced myself, to be honest, for, up till recently. So, what do you have to say about that? What are kind of the findings that you found, that perhaps go against the, pushing that no pain, no gain, push harder approach that trainers do, push in their sessions, so to speak?
Yeah, so the no pain, no gain modality is quite prevalent, as you said, in the fitness industry. And I think for the vast majority of people, it doesn't really work long term to have this modality, because essentially you associate exercise with discomfort and pain, something unpleasant. And this association will become quite automatic and could potentially put off people from becoming or maintaining physical activity, because the first thing that will come to their mind is the pain, feeling out of breath, feeling exhausted, feeling dizzy, all these negative connotations with exercise. Exercise to be maintained long term, what we really need to experience is a feeling of pleasure, feelings of being ideally in a flow state, as opposed to feeling pressured and exhausted. And what we found in that study is that actually that was a study that we conducted with fitness instructors of a big multinational fitness company that has presence in North America, Oceania, and Europe. And you're right that this mentality of no pain, no gain was quite prevalent at the beginning, but we challenged this modality. And eventually, the fitness instructors realized why it doesn't work. And I quite particularly like one of the quotes we got when we interviewed the instructors at the end of the study. One of them said that as a result of the training, they were able to modify how they communicated with the exercises. And the exercises told this particular instructor that we like now you push us, but in a nicer way. So in a way, the fitness instructor was able to obviously maintain this expectations and standards in terms of what they wanted from the exercises to achieve, but they were able to do it in a way that was more accommodative, more sympathetic, and it wasn't an approach that it was using another phrase, which is quite prevalent in the sports section, my way or the highway, because this particular approaches, they might motivate short term, but those who are very, very active and very fit and they have very high goals, but they don't really work with the vast majority of the exercises. Those who struggle to start exercise or those who struggle to keep up exercise.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because it from my experience, it's just so reinforced as an instructor and a trainer that people want to be pushed to the limit, so to speak. But yeah, again, your study found something very different, and perhaps there are people who there's a better way to go about it, and using those STT needs as a model that we as trainers could perhaps use to actually keep people in classes, keep people enjoying the workout itself as well.
Yeah, pushing oneself to the limits is something that works at very high levels of performance, and we see that in elite sport. But it's not the strategy that could be. It's not the public health strategy. It's not the public health message to motivate the unmotivated.
Right. So you're saying it kind of would depend on their big initial level of motivation, so to speak. If you're more at a less advanced level of motivation, or not an elite athlete, if you like, then it would be better to perhaps use the approach that you're advocating for, or that you found in the study. Is that right?
Yeah, to some extent. I don't think, though, that yes, I agree with what you said. But even when you come to more experienced exercises, more seasoned exercises, I should constantly associate exercise with a feeling of displeasure and pain. Actually will not do much good in terms of their psychological well-being.
And no, that makes a lot of sense. And so we talked about instructors and trainers, and I'm interested as well to hear your thoughts on medical practitioners and, for example, doctors, exercise physiologists. How can they perhaps use the STT framework to get more adherence into not just exercise, but it could be medication, which, there's adherence problems with a lot of different medications, a lot of different treatment modalities. So how can perhaps they use this model to gain more consistency of adherence from their patients?
Yeah, that's a good question. The principles of communication advocated by self-determination theory are more or less applicable to a wide variety of individuals in position of authority and or expertise. So some of the trainings of communication that we use to train fitness instructors or sport coaches are the same that have been used in other studies to train teachers and medical professionals. The strategies that support relatedness, competence, and autonomy are more or less the same across these domains. So, for instance, if you want to promote autonomy, one of the strategies is to give choice. You do it differently in a fitness setting. You can do it differently when you are a doctor interacting with your patient. So, as a doctor, obviously, you have the authority in terms and the expertise in terms of what is the best treatment, but sometimes there isn't one best treatment. There are a few choices. So as a doctor, you can advise, but also it's important to give choice to your patients and acknowledge the feelings, the negative feelings, their anxieties, and try to, where possible, accommodate concerns. That's for autonomy. For competence, obviously, the same principles of communication in terms of giving feedback, providing appropriate structure, set realistic goals. So the operationalization of these principles is context specific, but the principles are invariant and could be applied across different significant others.
And I'm curious, just on the back of that, have you seen this actually used in practice, anywhere in the world by medical health practitioners, outside the confines, say, of a clinical trial, or is this yet to really be implemented in practice, so to speak?
It has been. There are studies using healthcare professionals that have used self-determination theory. And are they observing how need supportive these healthcare professionals are, or training these professionals to be more need supportive? There is a similar model to, well, it has quite a lot of overlap with the SDT approach. It's called the 5 A's. It's about asking, advising, and essentially it's about promoting autonomy, and the other two psychological needs in interactions with patients. And the 5 A's model has been recently advocated by the American Heart Association as a very promising framework for helping people with heart problems in terms of modifying important lifestyle behaviors, primarily physical activity and healthy eating. So it's quite promising that this prestigious professional association, the American Heart Association, is advocating essentially an SDT-based approach to promote changes in lifestyle behaviors.
All right. Okay. I didn't know that. Well, I know what my reading later for tonight will be to check out this 5 A's model. Just, I suppose, finally, Nikos, I want to be respectful of your time. The stepping outside, perhaps the confines of exercise now. I see, this is just talking to young people in general now, and I've been subject to this myself, but in terms of career paths and career goals, some people, and when I was younger, certainly kind of geared out and set my career path based on what society, family, friends thought was the notion of successful, right? Whereas I understand, with SDT, we would predict we'd see more psychological well-being, more longevity in a career, perhaps even if you did something that's more in line with your values, or that you actually enjoyed, in and of itself, right? So when you've got a conflict between those two, how would a young person go about, navigating those pressures when perhaps it may lead them astray in terms of, those outcomes I just listed for a career path sense?
That's a very good question, and it's difficult, I guess, to give an easy answer to that, because it depends on the culture within which one person operates, and how much autonomy they have at the end of the day. How easy it's for them to rebel, so to speak. And we do see that often people are forced in a way to make career choices that are not aligned with their values and interests. And these pressures could come from a great number of factors. It could be, for instance, survival factors. Basically, the reason some of these choices were not giving them enough money to survive, but often is the pressure from the social environment, but primarily the parents, in shaping these choices. And I guess I think there isn't as you said, eventually these people who will forced to take a career path that is not aligned with their values and goals, these people will not enjoy their career, and to some extent they might likely to drop out. And when they become financially independent or older, they might change their career path, either very early by dropping out from their university studies, or later on by stopping their career. And those who stay long-term are likely to suffer in terms of feeling low work motivation, and feeling low stimulation for work, and unhappy. I guess, as I mentioned earlier, if there is no escape, so to speak, one needs to identify what elements of the job are fun or could be made more fun and more interesting. So is there anything you can do with your current career path? Any modifications that are within your control to make it more enjoyable and more personally meaningful? If so, try to change those to make the job more interesting. But of course, the best course of action is to educate parents and the social environment about the consequences of forcing young people to make choices that are not aligned with the values, these young people's values and goals. And of course, parents, more often than not, have good intentions, right? They don't do it. Some do it because they want to unfulfill their own unsuccessful career dreams, but more often than not, parents have good intentions and they see some primarily financial benefits from these career choices. But there has to be some sort of balance, and I think giving more education to parents in terms of what are the consequences of forcing and pressuring young people to make such choices is quite important. It's good to offer advice and not offer guidance, but at the end of the day, the decisions should be made by the children.
I think it's a really important point, and there's a lot there to stew over, particularly if you are a young person and you are in the midst of that, and trying to decide what's a more authentic career path for yourself versus what society says is successful, if there's a conflict there.
Yeah, in some societies it's easy to choose an alternative career path and others, right?
Yeah, no, that's very true. It is context dependent, as you said. Yeah. Are there any kind of other comments you wanted to make, Nikos, wrapping up?
I guess it is important to prioritize what you want to achieve, and don't be overly ambitious, and set goals that are in line with what you believe and what you value. Ideally, goals that you'll have fun trying to pursue them. And try to elicit social support from your environment when pursuing these goals, being a career-related or health-related goals. and be prepared to modify your goals. Another cliche phrase I don't like very much is the never give up. We talked earlier about some other cliches in the fitness industry. That's another one, never give up. And I think that's, again, maybe this cliche comes from good intentions of people need to persist and achieve their goals. But sometimes goals could be too difficult to attain, and pursuing these unattainable goals will make you suffer, and eventually will lead you nowhere. If anything, it might cause you burnout. And so you have to be prepared to be flexible with your goal striving. Whatever goals you pursue in your life, you have to be able to evaluate them regularly. And if the long-term prospects don't look good, do adjust your goals and get people around you if you need help to help you to readjust your goals by lowering your expectations, or potentially re-engage with other goals, other meaningful goals in your life, because there are a lot of different roads that lead to Rome.
That's fantastic advice, Nikos, and yeah, certainly advice that even myself, I know that it's hard to disengage from that never give up. When you hear it so often. So yeah, it's a good reminder there of the value of sometimes pivoting.
Yeah, what we most often we see those who achieve triumph over adversity, and these are the few cases, and we don't really, maybe like 2 out of 100 people, and we don't hear much about the other 98 who got disillusioned, failed, experienced anxiety, depression, burnout, for pursuing this again, for actually pursuing goals which are unattainable, because this kind of stories don't make a good Hollywood movie, unlike the 2% of the stories.